I think location is hugely important to personal happiness. I think sometimes you can get that feeling, you visit somewhere and you just think this is somewhere I'd really like to live.
Wherever you go, you're the same person, taking up the same amount of space. Your personality doesn't change when you get past the Chiswick roundabout on the M4.
You have these ideas that you'll be completely transformed into someone so much more peaceful and zen and healthy. You take all your problems with you.
The same relationship problems, same family problems that you had before, you just transplant them to a different location.
If I felt upset or puzzled, I'd go and sit down outside somewhere. I mean, when I was in London, if I went through a really bad patch, I'd drive out to the coast and look at the sea. That release, that emotional comfort or whatever, is actually just on the doorstep here.
When I considered leaving London, I think I imagined it as a clean break, that I would have to say goodbye to it. Of course, that's not the case.
My friends and my family were all quite anti me moving. I mean, I think partly they could see that I was happy. I don't think they realised how unhappy David was. Having been here a while, my marriage then broke down.
We were lucky enough not to have sold our house in London. So I was thinking, actually, we could just go back tomorrow.
I can still understand the appeal of cities, but I think they can be quite hard places to live. Perhaps quite a few people get to that stage of thinking, I could do with moving away from the big city and everything.
Going back to London, that was exciting. It's like, what's not to like about this? This is amazing. London is a great place to live. There's so much freedom here.
You can keep visiting it for countless weekends and still really enjoy all the great things about it. But then you can come home to somewhere a bit more peaceful.
Living in Richmond had a sort of countryside element, if you like, because we had Richmond Park.
I grew up in a village which is about 20 miles south of Bristol, and I hated it.
When my brother and I were small, my dad would take us to Richmond Park. We could spend all day there, there's deer there, and you can roam around quite freely.
I like going back now, but as a child I really didn't like living in the country.
I very much identified with London and felt that I was a Londoner.
So I mostly grew up in London. We did have a stint in Sussex, which I loved, and a little bit of me wanted that for my kids as well. They were born in Hackney in East London, and there were parts of that I absolutely loved. But there were bits about it I wasn't so fond of. I wasn't so fond of the pollution that they breathed in every day on the walk to school.
It's an ancient dilemma, if you like, country mouse versus town mouse. Like Tom and Barbara in The Good Life. I mean, it's really hard work.
Being isolated might look beautiful, but actually might not be very practical, and then you could really feel cut off.
Sitting in pubs in Dean Street doesn't train you for, carting barrow loads of cow manure from one place to another and so on.
I've sort of always thought it would be quite nice to live in a cottage right out up a hill with hardly any other houses around. Actually, that could be a real pain, because in the winter, when you want to nip out to the supermarket for a pint of milk, you've got to get in your car, maybe the roads are snowed up or flooded.
We woke up on Christmas Eve to discover that the entire ground floor was several inches in water.
I mean, city people need to give it some proper thought, because city people aren't trained for it. And you can look a bit ridiculous and you can make a lot of mistakes.
We relied entirely on neighbours, some of whom we'd never met before, but who came splashing through the flood to help. And I felt so optimistic in the aftermath, because I thought, God, there's an amazing community of people here who I really want to get to know. That was an incredible thing to discover.
So I remember we set out very early in the morning. We had 2 large white vans, and I just remember driving. I love driving big white vans. I had a fairly tearful goodbye to my parents, and it was quite exciting.
When you come back to London, you feel like a bit of a sort of bumpkin. And I remember quite clearly arriving at Paddington Station, sort of walking through and thinking, God, it's so busy here.
One of my criteria for moving anywhere was that we needed to have a railway station. The other thing was thinking in terms of jobs. Where were the sort of centres of population, which is where the jobs were more likely to be?
It was a complex equation balancing proximity to relatives against proximity to the coast and to London, because we knew we'd have to come back and forth for work.
We'd made this move, we'd taken on this adventure as a family unit.
It has definitely brought us together as a family of 4.
I got a job, then David got a job. We found somewhere to live quite quickly. Brilliant nursery for the kids.
When we first went to the countryside, I woke up every day thinking, I'm just so lucky, this is amazing. Towards the end, I was not feeling that. I was feeling frustrated and poor and unhappy. But to be back in London, again, I started to get that feeling again.
Everything just sort of slotted into place.
I didn't find it difficult in the slightest moving back. I just slotted straight back in.
My husband was raised in the countryside. He craved it. I felt ambivalent, but in the end, it was something he really wanted. And as we moved into the first lockdown in London, I could really begin to see the value of a move.
I think I was very conscious when I first moved here of not being a northerner.
I know that people have an idea that village life is very gossipy and intrusive. It's definitely not been that at all.
We found the community really welcoming, and there was a big mix of people. So it's not like you're just the only city exiles in a kind of group of farmers, because there's all sorts of different people.
It's been really welcoming in a really relaxed, nice way.
I know I'm not Cumbrian through and through, but I've found people really friendly.
Our local pub was run by a really nice landlord, and that got a good mix of people. He tried to make locals and outsiders welcome.
Our next door neighbour came round immediately with, I think, tea and biscuits and an offer of dinner that night so that we didn't have to cook for ourselves in the midst of the chaos.
There was a big group of, North Devon hippies who were really nice. They were the sort of, what I would call the poshies, who were the sort of hunting type people on Exmoor, very welcoming, nice Sunday lunches.
There was a big basket of fresh fruit and veg and a lovely house plant.
I started meeting a lot of people who also had moved here from elsewhere. There's almost a sort of expat lifestyle sort of thing.
Soon after, a bottle of Prosecco arrived on the doorstep.
And there's always going to be someone who thinks, oh, you're sort of stuck up people from London or whatever, and they might be right. We kept bees, chickens, ferrets, pigs, grew vegetables, made hay. I had a scythe. We wouldn't buy battery farmed chickens and things like that. Everything was organic. But it is a real joy to dig up your own potatoes and fill a trug with muddy vegetables that you've grown from seed and bring them back into the kitchen and put them on the kitchen table and eat them.
My job remains in London, and I can do that work from a laptop in my sitting room that doesn't involve me engaging with the difficulties of actually finding a job in the rural economy. And that's something that I'm really aware of and I feel a certain amount of guilt about.
We moved back to London in a slightly gradual way. So my book writing had completely sort of run out of steam. Victoria and I, in the meantime, had pursued a secondary fantasy, which was to run a small bookshop and event venue in London.
I do think people, if they're thinking of moving to the countryside, they do need to think, what will happen if I lose my job? What am I going to do instead to get some income in?
Running a business in London, it's probably easier to be in London to run it rather than in Devon.
I think the biggest drawback for me has been my career and the effect on my career.
every single journey involves getting in the car. While we might be appreciating nature more, I think we're probably, oh, I hate to say it, but we might well be damaging it more than we were in London.
When we moved back to London, it was great. We just barely used the car. You can walk everywhere, you can cycle everywhere, you can get the underground.
When I took voluntary redundancy, I thought, oh, I'll just get another job. Then I found I was pregnant. So I was back at sort of square one in terms of, I had 2 kids already at primary school, I had a baby on the way. We were in a recession, trying to find the sort of job that I'd been used to doing was really difficult.
I have quite a few friends now who are thinking of leaving the city and are house hunting. The one bit of advice that I do give people is that you really need to find the house that makes it feel like magic.
I can go to the top of a hill locally and sort of feel rooted to the earth, but I'm almost reaching up to the sky as well. I know that sounds really sort of corny, and I never had a feeling like that in the city. And it's not that I don't love cities, I love cities. I've never had that feeling of truly being at home, of just feeling part of the environment.
I think you can actually be happy anywhere, really. That's what I've discovered after doing both. So it's not so much the location as your state of mind.
A lot of us aren't either city people or country people, like I had previously assumed.
Victoria and I discussed whether or not we'll move back a lot. She really, really misses it. I'm perfectly happy here at the moment.
I thought that most people would find themselves at ease in one setting or the other. But actually, I think most of us are very malleable and can thrive in either setting. It's just that the things that sustain you change.
It was an adventure, and I think that there was a very satisfying sense that we'd had an idea and then carried it out. So even though it might be difficult, I would never regret not having tried out that thing that I wanted to do.